Good evening and welcome to Harvard's ARCO Forum. I'm Joe McCarthy, Associate Dean and Director of Degree Programs, and it's my pleasure this evening, on behalf of the Kennedy School of Government and the COCOLUS program, to introduce the current and former Prime Ministers of the Republic of Albania, the Honorable Ilir Meta to my left, and the Honorable Fatos Nano to his left. Both of these gentlemen have made great personal sacrifices to lead their country through the critical period of transition from communism to democracy, and we are honored to have them with us this evening. We are also grateful to the COCOLUS program for arranging and sponsoring this visit. Mr. Meta, Albania's current Prime Minister, is a graduate of the University of Tirana, where he concentrated in political economy. And he began his political career as one of the leaders of the student movement that brought an end to 50 years of communist rule in his country. Since 1992, he has been a member of the leadership of the Socialist Party in Albania and a member of the Albanian Parliament. He has served in various leadership roles in government, including Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State for Integration at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. On October 27th of last year, President Recep Mejdani nominated Mr. Meta to head the new government in Albania. Mr. Meta was sworn in as Prime Minister 2 days later. We are very honored to have Prime Minister Meta address us this evening. The Honorable Fatos Nano, currently Chairman of the Socialist Party of Albania, has been 3 times Prime Minister of Albania, most recently in 1997-1998. Mr. Nano is the founding chairman of the Socialist Party of Albania and was first elected a member of the Albanian Parliament in 1991. In 1993, Mr. Nano became the target of unsubstantiated charges of corruption. His prosecution was condemned by international civil rights groups such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and other organizations. The charges against Mr. Nano were eventually dismissed last year by a court verdict declaring his innocence. Mr. Nano has been truly tested for his political beliefs, and we are quite honored to have him join us this evening as well. Our format for this evening will be that Prime Minister Meta, followed by former Prime Minister Nano, will offer remarks from this podium. Following that, I will return to the podium to moderate questions addressed to our guests in the custom of the ARCO Forum. So without further ado, I give you the Honorable Ilir Meta, Prime Minister of Albania.
Honorable participants, dear Dean McCarthy, I wish to warmly thank, first of all those who organized this event, and in particular the COCOLUS program at Kennedy School. And also I wish to thank Dean McCarthy for his kind introduction. I'm deeply honored to be here today in Harvard at the Kennedy School of Government and in front of this wonderful audience. Harvard is the oldest American university and one that has produced many leaders throughout the years. George Marshall proclaimed here for the first time the intention for a Marshall Plan for post-World War II Europe. The Marshall Plan is very famous in our part of the world. A number of Albanians have graduated from Harvard. One of Albania's foremost pioneers of independence and later a prominent diplomat who served as the first Albanian envoy to Washington, Faj Konica, graduated from Harvard in 1912. I mention him in particular because he laid the foundations of Albania's relationship with the States by signing at that time some 8 treaties. Then we took a long break. Communism did not allow Albanians to come to Harvard. It actually did not allow us to travel freely, even within our own country. I'm glad to know that this year the Albanian flag was raised for the first time here at the Kennedy School. We managed to get our first fellow here this year through the Kokalis program. We have also managed to enroll several other fellows in the executive program. One of them became Minister of Economy upon his return from the executive program. Probably this is the power of Harvard. Because this is Harvard and its famed Kennedy School, I'd like to talk a bit about democracy and transition in a country that may not be quite unknown to you. I believe the images of Kosovo 1 year ago and the role played by Albania in hosting over 500,000 refugees may be still fresh in your memories. Those of you who know the Balkans doubtless know that we have a unique personality. Albania in many ways was both strange and wonderful in the past, and it remains interesting in the present. It is beautiful. We have 3 million people. Nature has given us many wonders. We have about 200 miles of beautiful coastline. Imagine steep mountains rising up from the sea. We have abundant water resources, but have many blackouts in the winter. We have many valuable minerals, but import most of them. We have a small population, but many unemployed. We have a few more good things. We are growing at a rate of 8% per year. Inflation for the last years has been under control. We managed to bring it down from 42% in 1997 to 1% that is today. We have little foreign debt. Most of it is World Bank loans with very favorable conditions. The grant element in these loans is almost 75%. I'm glad the World Bank is there for us, but I wish we had other options to borrow at such rates. We have many people below the poverty line. We know that development is a solution to poverty. We want to develop and we want to alleviate poverty, but the means we have at our disposal are scanty. The budget of the government of Albania is about $1.2 billion per year. This university may have a bigger budget than our entire government. I'm not talking for Bill Gates, who has more money than all Southeastern European countries put together. Let me discuss how we got here. For almost half a century, Albania suffered the isolation of the cruelest communist regime in all Eastern Europe. It was worse than Fidel Castro's Cuba. At least he allows tourists in the country and gets some hard cash from it. We did not allow even birds to pass through our borders. I have heard Mr. McCarthy jokes, favorable joke, that 20 years ago there were 2 places in the world that you could never get into. One was Albania and the other was Harvard Business School. Albania now is open to any visitors, while Harvard Business School, I was told that is still closed. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a landmark of change for all countries under communism. Albanians took their first steps toward democracy in a blend of idealism, naivety, and strong will for change. Discontinuity of the political system brought a radical change in the political outlook of Albanians. A new political culture is being molded. The old values are constantly being transformed and the new ones are being introduced. During this process, the social tissue was torn apart, and if it is true that each new generation builds on what it receives from the past, then you can imagine the consequences we are facing nowadays. However, I want to make it clear that the legacy of communism, although present in the mentality of the people, is not the root cause of Albania's problems. Rather, it is the organizational structure that our type of communism bestowed on Albanian society. Albania entered modern life in a chaotic way. We had very weak institutions and no proper knowledge or education about capitalism. We were blindly working toward what we were told was good. The initial idealism and drive for change brought a relative prosperity to our country, making Albania a model student for the IMF and others who were watching our steps. In 1997, the bubble burst. It was replaced by chaos, anarchy, and a misconception of democracy, finding its expression in the collapse of pyramid schemes. It showed how superficial the changes were and how irresponsible government can be. It was like paradise found and paradise lost. Capitalism wasn't so easy. The biggest lesson learned from this was that economic change cannot be sustainable unless there is a change in mentality. Because for 50 years the communist government was responsible for every sector of society, alternative mechanisms to serve as safety nets were not in place. The opening of markets brought in foreign competition. I'm sure they teach you in school that competition is healthy to an economy, but try to convince those that lost their jobs in Albania. Many factories closed because they could not compete in cost and quality with foreign goods. Our technology was old and outdated. We could not replace it in time, and we could not subsidize factories anymore. Many Albanians crossed the borders to the neighboring countries in search of work. Many families were and are divided across borders. Phenomena like divorce, abortion, family violence, and crime skyrocketed. For all the above reasons, we call the decade the unbaptized decade. Without wanting to enter into a detailed analysis, I'd like to underline the fact that the Albanian political class of this decade not only did not bear the burden of shaping this period well, but in many instances it hampered the development. The political class of this decade is an offspring of the former communist era. This heritage is intuitive building. It is a reflection of the old way of thinking and acting. This is the major handicap of this decade of transition. Albania needs to grow a new political elite free from past prejudice and oriented towards Western ways of governing. The increasing involvement of a new generation of politicians in the current political scenery of Albania is a good first step. Being as young as I am, to be the chief executive of my country is not so easy. Many people resist accepting new things. Many people do not trust young politicians easily. We have to prove that we know how to lead and that we can do it well. If more of us get into politics and government, we can support each other. I would encourage all of you to try public service, because it is not only rewarding for you personally, but also your countries need you. Many of you here may be from developing countries. They need new thinking, new points of view, new ideas, and energetic young individuals. I would like to encourage all Albanians who may be here tonight to come back home after they graduate. We are suffering seriously from brain drain. We need you. President Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And this applies in an urgent way to my country. Albanians had to go through hard times years ago. It is actually easier for us today, but we need the educated people to bring the Western experience and practice in Albania. Let's not be divided among us. Let's not be extremists in supporting one party or another, but let's weigh our options democratically and make sure that they benefit our country. President Kennedy also said political action is the highest form of citizenship. Let me also tell you about some of the priorities of my government. We are working to create a strong and functioning democracy, political dialogue, and increased participation with the opposition in joint projects is our desire and our goal. We are encouraging cooperation with civil society. We consider them an asset that spurs better governance. We are working heavily on our economy, increasing private participation in infrastructure and services. We are trying to strengthen our institutions and enforce our laws better. We are fighting corruption and increasing citizen participation in decision-making. We are trying to build up a stronger safety net and provide employment opportunities. On the external front, we are working to strengthen our ties with the European Union, NATO, and the United States. Membership in EU and NATO remains our strategic goal. Our bilateral relations with NATO have been raised to a higher level following the Kosovo crisis. We are also working to modernize our state and society, revise our laws, and upgrade our systems to be able to join to the EU. We know we have a long way to go. Mr. Nano will address our stand on Kosovo. I would only like to mention that the international community should maintain the embargo on Milosevic's regime. Otherwise, he will gain renewed strength and his grip of power may tighten. I regret to see people in Serbia suffer because of him. They do not deserve it, but a bad leader can devastate a country. And the Hoxha did it to us for 45 years, but we learned. I remember saying from Dante, which I thought of very often when I was in school. He said, there is no point in studying unless you remember what you have learned. And people must remember, and leaders must remember the past, because if they do not, the foundations for the future will be weak. I'm sure that Serbs have learned something, but they also need the help of the international community to get rid of Milosevic. I also want to say a few words about the role of IMF and World Bank in the development of Albania. A few weeks ago, there was a demonstration in Washington, D.C. against them. The intellectual debate centers on the fact that Bretton Woods institutions, they were set up to do different things than what they are doing today. For example, the world does not have the fixed exchange rate system based on gold anymore. But the world has countries like Albania and others that are still in a stage of development, where they need these institutions to help with fiscal and monetary advice, as well with soft loans. We do not have a significant amount of experience on our shoulders to foresee every crisis and provide a solution for it. We also do not have access to capital or capital market where we can go freely to borrow funds for development. For some countries like mine, this is not an option. But I know that we need these institutions in this form or in another form. We need what they provide to us, and we cannot get it elsewhere. I know I could not possibly have covered all issues in which you may be interested. Mr. Nano will cover additional ones and will be available to your questions. Once again, I thank you so much for your kind hospitality and for your attention.
Well, good evening and Mirbrama. I should start with thanks for the Kokalis program and the Kennedy School of Government that gave us this wonderful opportunity to share some of our views with you all. And especially thank Dean McCarthy for the very gentle introduction he made of us both. But we started thinking of how to thank better these possibilities, these huge possibilities that Harvard and Kennedy School of Government are offering to Albania, by doing our best to have more Albanians be trained here. And we were glad to learn that one of our civil servants, the Kokalis fellow, Mr. Prifty, is doing very well. And we don't feel challenged, even if anybody knows that this place produces prime ministers and presidents. So it's very reassuring for us to see so many young people interested in politics, in leadership, and in making a better world. Well, JFK reminds me as well of one of its saying, the future promise of any nation can be directly measured by the present prospects of its youth. So I certainly wish you all well, but my country is proud of its young generations too. So we all, me included, look at Prime Minister Mehta, the youngest prime minister in Europe, and the likes of him, and me, if you allow, in Albania, and feel confident that we have, for sure, better days in store for us. Allow me to remind everybody that only 1 year ago, Albania and the US were deeply involved in solving a huge humanitarian crisis, which resulted in a true national problem for us Albanians. It was not for sure a snapshot of the movie Wag the Dog. It was quite real. On the second day of the bombing of Yugoslavia, very early in the morning, must have been the time when NATO pilots were regaining their bases, we heard in Tirana a very loud explosion, unusual one. Many people thought in a moment of anxiety, Serbs had attacked Albania. In fact, the unusual noise was nothing but the explosive echo created after an F-117 passed the supersonic threshold. What we feared most did not happen. A pan-Balkan war did not start. And this brings to our attention the importance of the NATO bombing of the Serbian military as the best preventive measure to avoid a Balkan war. Everybody knows that in those days Macedonia became a watchtower and planning facility for a future ground intervention, whereas Albania was turned in a matter of days into a huge refugee camp for 500,000 traumatized and tortured Kosovars. We offered shelter and food to them and turned their survival into a matter of national priority. Please, try to understand that I included do not like war. As a matter of fact, I am more of a pacifist. But I feel sure that any other solution that would not have included an attack on the Serbian military from a non-neighboring power would have forced the Albanian population in the Balkans to resort to arms. Regardless of our pacific wishes, this could have been inevitable. I'm talking of 6 million Albanians living in the Balkans, figures that may seem negligible to start a global tragedy, but in a region where any lunatic is able to strike a match and blow up a powder keg, a person of wisdom will never find as many friends as it takes to put out the fire in time. But today, for sure, we have come here from Western Balkans in revival, where people of wisdom are increasing in number and some coalition of the wise is expanding. The passion to build new foundations on top of the ruins has become the struggle for life. Kosovo is the greatest and fastest construction site, but new bodies discovered daily under the ruins slow down the work. Macedonia has learned its lessons from the war as well, and Albanians and Macedonians there are dedicated to giving their living together a better chance. Finally, Montenegro is finding renewed strength in turning into an autonomous entity, the economy first, which not very long ago did not seem to stand any chances of survival without Serb oxygen. We in Albania are strengthening further our institutions, democratic ones, but we have still some way to go to become a modern country. We are trying to make good use of the great opportunities offered by progressive regional initiatives like the Stability Pact for the Balkans. So still Serbia is the only country in Southeastern Europe that does not want to let conflicts go. The bombing of Yugoslavia put an end to years of ethnic cleansing and barbarism in the Balkans. NATO reached its peacemaking objective, but could not bring democracy in Serbia. The source of conflict is still active, with Milosevic still in power. So we have to tighten further the democratic siege laid around Belgrade by extending multi-ethnic cohabitation further to the north. Extended economic and democratic progress and regional cooperation of the countries around Belgrade will cut the lost supply strings of Milosevic. Its war machine would have not survived the chronic economic crisis of Yugoslavia and the international embargoes had it not been for the Balkan mafia and illegal trafficking. I have met the man, Milosevic, personally in '97 in Crete, Greece, a Balkans leaders retreat. He had just come out from the Bosnian War and was, as always, trying to improve his international image by pretending to identify himself with the always most respected person in Serbia. He was very uneasy when we talked about the necessity of improvement of human rights in Kosovo. At one point, we were brainstorming on some issue like how to reduce budget deficits, and Greek Prime Minister Simiris, Macedonian President Gligorov of the epoch, Turkish Prime Minister Yilmaz, and others were debating on this issue when Milosevic launched. I would order the central bank to get rid of it. We all wanted to laugh, but Milosevic was serious. He even added that the West could have avoided the wars in former Yugoslavia by integrating it in the EU in early '92. I have heard that he has worked as a banker in Serbia and even in the US for a while. One wonders where he learned sort of these tricks, but in my understanding, Slobo is one of the few Stalinists still alive. In some tete-a-tete meeting we had, the first meeting to ever take place between leaders of Serbia and Albania in 50 years, I told him that the communication patterns us politicians were proving to be unable to build were being used very successfully by illegal traffickers on both sides of the borders that were shaking hands and sharing dirty money. So this is still the major danger we are facing. One day the Balkans might even enter a new conflict over criminal interests. Today Milosevic is weaker than at those times, and the former border between Albania and Serbia has turned into a border between Albania and Kosovo under the control of KFOR German troops, while custom officers of different nationalities collect taxes on account of UNMIK and not of Belgrade anymore. I'm not that naive to think that there are no more holes through which dirty money, narcotics and other smuggled goods slip, all of which constitute the activity of illegal traffickers. However, I believe that Milosevic is also missing very dearly these taxes gathered by UNMIK nowadays. I'm reminded of an expression used to describe Yugoslavia before Milosevic came to government. It went like this: Yugoslavia is made of 6 republics, 5 nations, 4 languages, 3 religions, 2 alphabets, and 1 Tito. Today they only have 2 republics, 2 languages, 2 religions, 2 armies, one of them being KFOR, and 1 Milosevic. And I'm convinced that soon the 2s will become 1s and Milosevic will be nil. This is based upon a reality where Balkan leaders in their frequent meetings now are no more discussing issues regarding rights of certain minorities, but rather on sustainable growth and absorption of foreign aid and direct investments. The fulfillment of this obligation is no more a matter of willingness, but a matter of time. I recall a very long talk I had with President Gligorov of Macedonia in '97, during which he tried to draw me within the maze of the Macedonian constitution to prove that it was simply impossible for his government to offer more chances to Albanians to get educated in their mother language. But at that time, 2 mayors of Albanian towns in Macedonia were put in prison not because they failed to meet the obligations towards their constituency, but because they displayed in front of their municipal buildings the Albanian flag. So the following trial constitutes a via crucis in itself, while today I can point out with great pleasure that Balkan leaders and people are using other codes of communication to the benefit of making borders less relevant. The EU for instance, is now negotiating with Albania and Macedonia the removal of customs. We are advocating the removal of trade barriers and the creation of free trade zones between the two countries. In the future, if political developments make it possible, this free trade area may incorporate Montenegro and Kosovo. Our legislation is being unified with that of the European Union, and Macedonia is walking along the same path as well, while UNMIC is applying EU legislation in many instances in Kosovo. So this is the path we have chosen and the one we are following. This is sort of picture of the Balkans we live today, and that's why I'm confident that the idea of Greater Albania would run contrary to the present developments and benefit no one. Albanian leaders have chosen integration instead of conflict. If the advancement and diffusion of technology will make an Albanian child almost equally qualified as an American one, can you imagine how minor the difference will be between an Albanian child in Albania and one in Kosovo? I'm honest when I say that it is stupid to try to stop this cultural, economic, and social integration of today. It will not take very long for this integration drive to naturally become political, based upon multi-ethnic democracy models, open societies, and open markets. Allow me finally to close my introductory notes with the story Ambassador Holbrooke told me upon his trip to Kosovo, to Drenica, the place where the tragedy started in '98. It was the first time that an American high official established any kind of contact with KLA paramilitaries. So Dick entered Holbrooke, entered Unique. The photos became very famous immediately. And for several hours, he talked to KLA leaders sitting cross-legged in a hut. And meeting Dick some months later in Switzerland, he asked me to see some more civilian representative of KLA. Not that sort of barbarian, he told me. Speaking of one of the peoples that was sitting on his left, if you remember the photo, a bared man, that, he said, was constantly shaking his Kalashnikov under his nose. So Dick couldn't understand at the epoch. That's what I had to explain to him, that the man close to him had formerly been a professional computer software designer in Switzerland. So he never knew how to use a Kalashnikov. And the problem is that if we don't change traditional mentalities and realities in the Balkans, we risk to lose modern educated people and spontaneously let them regain primitive means of existence like weaponry. But my optimistic note would be the one some Albanian student said in early fall, '98, when the Albanian faculties of the Pristina University were being given back into the hands of local students and professors. The guy, a friend of mine that was assisting the ceremony, told me at that precise moment, I saw tears of anger in the eyes of the politicians and tears of joy in the eyes of the students. We shouldn't allow that politicians in the Balkans build their career upon conflicts. This is our challenge, and we will win it. Thank you.
my thanks to the Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister for their insights on Albania and on the situation in the Balkans, and a special thanks to Prime Minister Meta for another joke I can use with my friends at the business school. This is always very helpful to have. We will now, as it is the custom at the ARCO Forum, turn to questions from the audience. You will see microphones to my sides here, and there are two set up in the balconies upstairs. Please, if you have a question, please do approach one of the microphones. We will proceed in this fashion, clockwise from my perspective, around the room to answer any questions that you have. If you could direct the question either to Mr. Mehta or Mr. Nano, and if not, one of them or both of them will give you an answer. Please identify yourself briefly before you give the question, and please keep it a question. We are not here to entertain long statements, but would like the Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister would like an opportunity to respond to questions from the audience. We'll begin over here. Please.
Thank you. My name is Iris Pilika. I'm a student at Wellesley College. And the first question that I had for both Prime Minister Mehta and former Prime Minister Nano is, what opportunities are there being open in Albania for Albanian students when they graduate to come back and help the country? The second question, it will be very short. It's kind of a minor issue with the many problems that we have today in Albania. But I wanted to ask first Mr. Nano, as a fellow Orthodox. The Albanian Orthodox Church has had a Greek national as its head for about 8 to 9 years now. I was wondering if that is considered as a violation of the constitution of the church in Albania. And also, when Mr. Yanulatos first came in Albania, he claimed that he would leave as soon as someone would be, an Albanian national would be able to be in his position and to help. I was wondering if there is anyone who could be in that position today. And to Mr. Mehta, I understand that there is a separation of the church and the state in Albania, but during Easter some weeks ago, and I hope this news is not true, I heard that Greek soldiers were holding icons at the parade in Durrës, at the Easter parade in Durrës. I'm wondering, can the Albanian army provide Albanian soldiers to carry these icons? Thank you very much.
I count at least 3 questions. Could you repeat the first question again? I've lost track of what the first question had to do with students.
The first is, what opportunities are being open in Albania for Albanian students so when they graduate they can come back and help?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Firstly, I hope that you heard my invitation to all the Albanian students that are here tonight to come back at home and to put at the disposal of the development of the country all the knowledge that they got here. And this invitation is useful to all the Albanian students that are studying abroad. And I have to say that some of them have responded positively. My new law advisor has finished Fulbright, and also Mr. Prifty. We're looking forward to see him in Tirana by the end of June, and many others have promised to come back at home and to work for the future of their country by putting in practice their knowledge that they got here and everywhere in the Western countries. So they have a lot of opportunities. We are in Hungary for them.
So, did you want to respond to the second question, Mr. Nana?
Yeah, simply, I would try to add that there is a simple, logical answer to the still killing question: why do young Albanians leave the country? In search of some standard functioning democracy models and realities that you find in the West. Okay, when they manage to integrate, leaving Albania, they do very well here. But we've been doing very well even under the Ottoman Empire circumstances, where we became governors of the world included. We had some sultans in our archives. So what we are offering to you, and this is our commitment, is build standard democracy in Albania. But we can't do it alone. Please come and assist your families and your country be like the US and other Western democracies as soon as possible. What we guarantee you is we won't recruit you politically. Be safe. And to the question of the Orthodox Church autonomy, let me be very complimentary with your interest, telling you as that I'm an Orthodox. I'm married like Father Leolin is. I'm invited with many Albanians to pay due respect to Father Anastas, who's leading actually the revival of the Albanian Orthodox Church in full compatibility with the Albanian state constitution by bringing in very short terms into the leading forces of the Albanian Orthodox Church the right people that will substitute him. He is not a possessive man, like all we Orthodox are not.
Thank you. Sir.
Yes, my name is Sorkat Mustafa. I'm a student at Boston University. My question, it's more of asking for a comment. I've been watching closely the development in Eastern countries as well as in Russia, and its similar development have continued in Albania, whereas the socialists are in power in Albania, being in a way the inheritors of the communist ideology that you explained very well left Albania behind about 50 years behind the rest of Europe. Now, I was just wondering, not more of like the moral right to lead Albania, but I was just, maybe you can comment on how do you explain your popularity?
Well, thank you for bringing me back to the source of my popularity, of our popularity. It's simply a democratic vote. And we get voted in almost every election because we have not included in our program the populist idea of betrayal, of deceiving people with unrealistic promises. As far as it concerns our heritage, if you like, well, I'm very glad and feel every day more motivated meeting American partners, explaining our ideas and listening them reply back, oh, if we ever knew socialism is like that, we could have invited our fathers to join your party. It's very non-prejudiced. It's very standard. It's something very similar to the Democratic Party in the US. And that's why not simply US as a strong democracy in the world have too many friends and sympathies in Albania, but also President Clinton's doctrine is very familiar with the ideas of the members of our party.
I have to say, though, that socialists are very closely related to communism, and Albanians, having gone through what they went through, like, how do you, how do they justify this, coming to terms with, like, a socialist party, which is basically like the remnants of, communists? They, like, in a lot of Albanians, they think of communism as, socialism being basically communism with a new name. That's...
You are free to make your vote, which will be, I'm sure, the minority one.
Like the comparison between the Freedom Party and the Nazis. That's basically it.
Thank you very much. I think we have a question in the mezzanine.
Hi, my name is Thomas Serrani. I have actually two questions. First for Mr. Mehta. A couple of weeks ago, I'm not quite sure the exact date, but I heard on BBC News about missing gold on the treasury, of the Albanian treasury. As a former employee of the Bank of Albania, I left Albania in 1995, and I'm still working as an account here in a bank. I'm curious to know, is this gold missing from the treasury of the Bank of Albania or from the other banks like National Commercial Bank or the other ones? And the second question is for Mr. Nano. The question is about the Greek troops Greek soldiers in Albania. Under the new situation now in Albania, what's their status, or what's the status going to be actually? Thank you.
So, regarding with your question about the damage that had our treasury, I have to say that last days have been arrested some of the authors of such damage, which is around 2.8 million US dollars, which is identified definitely from the Prosecutor General Office that has been damaged in the beginning of March 97, when there was a collapse of the pyramid schemes and when the institutions were disappeared. And we are confident that it will be possible to arrest all the authors of such a scandal and all the people responsible to preserve it, and also to find where the gold was gone. It has been a part of the treasury that is under the administration of the National Bank, and at once that we have discovered this damage, we have informed international institutions, and they have confirmed that it doesn't make any risk for our program of the cooperation. And in the context of the whole treasury, it doesn't make any problem for our economic program, but anyway, this is a scandal, part of many scandals that happened as a result of the failure of the institutions in the 97. But it's very good that this scandal now is going to be highlighted. Some of the authors have been arrested, and I'm confident that it will be highlighted completely.
Thank you.
Well, for the second question, I have to start saying that the Greek military in Albania have nothing to do with my party, but they are part of our Euro-Atlantic orientation. It's a program commitment for partnership for peace, cooperation with NATO. They are part of the NATO presence in the region and in Albania. They are part of the 1,600 troops that assist Albania in military and demilitarization programs. They are obeying to the Western Command that includes well-reputed American generals in the headquarters, and they are behaving standardly as other NATO military and very friendly partners, like everybody that assisted Albania, Kosovo, and the Balkans have a very different future from the conflictual past.
Thank you.
I know there's another question in the mezzanine. We'll come back to you in a moment if you'll be patient. Sir, you've been waiting for a while.
Thank you. My name is Zayed Yassin. I'm a student here at the college. I was in Albania last summer working with refugees from the Kosovo crisis, and one of the big concerns was in the great strength of criminal elements in Albania, especially in the south, in Flora, where it was unsafe for ordinary civilians to venture into the streets after 8 or 9 p.m. and especially given the incredible availability of heavy weapons after the collapse of '97 and the widespread belief of complicity of many government officials in the mafia and organized crime. What do you see as the future, and what are you going to be doing to fight the incredible strength of these criminal elements? And I have a second very short question. Given the rise of religion that has been allowed after the fall of the Anver regime, how do you feel the future of relations between Muslim and Orthodox Albanians? Thank you.
For the first question, I have to say that you are welcome in Albania this summer in order to see the difference with a year ago. And I have to stress that the improvement of the of the security and of the public order in the country since the Kosovo war and Kosovo crisis was ended, it has been very significant and very obvious and very clear in the whole districts of the country, by including also Lora. And also the process of disarmament has proceeded very well. And today the security and the public order is returned to a normality, and we are doing the best to strengthen it more. And about the mafia that you are mentioning, I have to say that our challenges now remain to fight the drug trafficking and also the clandestine traffic, which pass sometimes through Albania, which is a transit country in the region. And for this reason, we are strengthening the cooperation with the government of neighboring countries in order to respond to this regional organized crime with regional cooperation. And we have succeeded to make progress, but for sure that it will be needed to be done much more. And we are confident that we'll do it.
And about the religious differences?
About the religions differences, I have to say that in Albania there are no, I would wish as a Prime Minister to see the opposition and the majority to be as much as tolerant as the religions are in Albania. Every difference that is going to be mentioned, there is exaggeration. There is a great tolerance among the religions. They respect each other, they greet each other, and Albania is one of the best examples where the religions can cohabit and can live in harmony, and can be a model to be followed by us, by the politicians.
Thank you.
Mr. Nano?
If you allow me just a personal example of religious cohabitation and tolerance. Well, I'm by origin an Orthodox. My wife is native of a very fanatic Muslim family. The day she was born, her father, who was illiterate, went to the municipality and gave her a Catholic name, Regina. I don't know to what religion my son and my daughter belong anymore, but they are free to opt for any.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Ira Panayoti, and I'm a student at Simmons College studying international relations, political science with minor in economics. I would like to pose 2 questions to each of the guest speakers today, granted to treat you equally. And the first question would be in reference to Mr. Mehta's reference to Mr. Mehta's mentioning of the elites in Albania. From studying international relations and political science, I have noticed that in every country there are elites, and there are also gatekeepers in the elites. So my question would be, since in Albania, just like elsewhere, there are gatekeepers that pertain to the existing elite, how do you expect to adequately integrate new elites in power, avoiding repetition of corruption, thus promoting innovation and decent governing? And the other question would be for Mr. Nano, which is...
Why don't I just...
Yes.
Let's go one question at a time. And could you repeat that summary of your first question?
Okay. Well, let me just say this in simple words. Basically, the gatekeepers. In every society, there are elites, and in every elite, there are gatekeepers. The gatekeepers would be the ones who allow people from the masses to penetrate in the elites. Generally, gatekeepers pertain to the existing elites. And since these are the gatekeepers that control who gets there, how are we to make sure that there won't be a repetition of the same mistakes, and the same elites that imitate the previous ones will not come in power?
The question about how can you broaden opportunity to everyone in Albania rather than having it in control of a few gatekeepers who decide who gets to become part of the elite and who does not. So how to broaden and democratize opportunity in the Republic of Albania. Is that a fair summary?
Basically, the ones who are in power, they also control who gets in power. And how do we make sure that the ones who are in power do not allow people that will repeat the same form of governing?
I see. So I have to say that it is not too easy to create a new elite, and also it cannot be done overnight, and it is a process which has to do with also with broader participation of the people that are not for the moment involved in politics, or that are not prominent for the moment, but that have the courage to become public and to become evident in order to be present, because also the elite can be not nominated from me or from Mr. Nan or from everybody. I have to say that...
But you do control who gets there. You do control who gets there.
Let him respond.
It is not too easy to make such control, because also there is not such intention. And I have to say that, for example, the Socialist Party of Albania, it is the new example in the countries. It's a new model which has followed the pattern of the other democratic, socialist, social democratic parties in Europe, which has not as such, which has an internal democracy, internal debate, which has such cohabitation, which do not make the people afraid to express themselves, to express their opinion, even when it is different with the leadership of the party. And I have to say that I'm still very young, but there are younger ministers than me in the cabinet, and I'm optimistic that in the future more younger will become, and also we are doing the best by being sure that we need more people to be involved in governing the country, to address to the civil society. And many people prominent in different figures, they have joined to the government, or they are invited to join to the government, and we cooperate with them. But anyway, this is a challenge, in particular, I have to say, in the opposition, more than in the governing party.
Mr. Nano has a follow-on.
I am, well, in reference to Mr. Mehta, then I'm expecting to succeed you as Prime Minister of Albania.
Yeah.
And as for Mr. Nano...
No, excuse me. He had a follow-on to that
please,
response.
Thank you.
I could simply try to make two short examples of how we're trying to build a scheme that opens the party to the civil society and gets fresh blood into the political decision-making system. There are two very important statutory rules of the party asking that we enter into partnership contacts with NGOs and invite them to nominate, to elect their representatives to start political talks with the party, because we are interested by law to filter preliminarily legislative initiatives that impact on business community, on trade union organizations, before we go to the parliament. And if they get elected from their respective civil society organization, they could have an ex officio place in our decision-making bodies. The second statutory rule is that starting from this general local elections in this fall, we will commit the local structures of the party, build common candidating lists with civil society people. So these are two very important gates open to people like you included.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had another question for Mr.
Well,
Nano.
we
which
want to
was-
give everyone a chance this evening to ask.
This will be a very short question.
And they will get an opportunity perhaps
Okay,
later.
thank you.
Gentleman up in the balcony,
Vidyan
thank you for
Tolka.
waiting.
Vidyan Tolka, Brandeis University. Mr. Prime Minister, which Kosovar political party has the more effects on today's affairs in Albania? That's it.
Could you,
I didn't
could
hear
you state that question, please?
which.
Which Kosovar political party has the most effects on today's Albanian politics?
So, I have to say that I have to say that it's very important to know which Kosovar political party has more influence in Kosovo. And this is a difficult question, which needs the local elections to give an answer. But I have to say, as a Prime Minister, that the government of Albania is open for cooperation with all the political parties in Kosovo that are working for peace, for democracy, that are cooperating with international community to build a new institutional framework there. And the preference will be decided by the citizens of Kosovo. So I cannot say something more in specific, because you know that in Albania the opinion polls do not function well.
Yes, ma'am.
Irma Spao, graduate law student at Boston University. I had two questions for Mr. Prime Minister. We keep reading in the press of gruesome stories involving violence against women, Albanian women and foreign women, and carried out by people from different prostitution rings, as well as people that operate under color of state law. What, if anything, have you done as a government to curb this violence and probably establish some shelters or some counseling for these victims, and also give them access to legal redress? And my second question has to do with the Albanian delegation in the last meeting in Budapest. Could you comment on why was it that the Albanian delegation just turned their back to the Albanian Kosovars when they cried for independence? Can't we shape a foreign policy that furthers our own national interests rather than just be colonists of our neighbors? Thank you.
Okay, so I have to say that as a result of this difficult transition, many phenomena were appeared, as I mentioned also in my speech, and also many phenomena related to the difficult position that also the women have today in our society because of the divorce, because of other phenomena, and I have to accept that we have to do more in order to show our attention and to take care for assisting them. And for this reason, we have a committee on women in the Prime Minister's office, which is doing the best by cooperating also with the NGOs that are focused on such issues in order to shape the government policies, but furthermore government actions to assist them. But I have to accept that we have to do more in this direction.
Yes, ma'am.
For the second question.
Oh, would you like to follow that? Yeah.
For the second
question.
Well, I have the advantage of having been in Budapest at the forum that not only Albanian but Balkan political leaders had a great opportunity to participate with the initiative of the American Project on Ethnic Relations. So I'm afraid you don't have the information that produced the parliament, which was very positive. And if you continue feeling concerned that Albanian leaders there turn their backs to Kosovo, I don't know who is left to work for sort of very traditional things that you mentioned, because everybody representing Kosovo politics was there. And they were very cooperative with the American, EU, and United Nations ideas and assistance to Kosovo to have a very different future of turning back under Milosevic control. So we will have, with Kosovo included, a new situation in the Balkans where everybody should feel independent as a European citizen at home.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Ariela Kuya, and I'm a student here at Harvard College, and I have two questions for you. The first one is, for the past 10 years, the Albanian government has been notorious for high levels of corruption. I wanted to know what methods the socialist government is using to fight corruption, and how are this method different from past governments. And the second question is, there's great hostility between the Albanian Socialist and the Albanian Democratic Party. And now that the Socialist Party is in power, I was wondering what you were doing to maybe ease this hostility, or maybe have a more integrated government, possibly by maybe hiring skilled democratic officials and putting them in positions, in government positions and things of that sort. Thank you.
Regarding with the first question, I have to say that the corruption is a phenomena which do not belong only to Albania, but which belongs in particular to all the countries that have passed the transition. And the corruption is not just a question of some people, of some officials. I think that the challenge is much more difficult. We have to find and to change a massive mentality among the people to become rich overnight, to try to get a job in some sectors where they can, or where they think that they can become rich overnight, like they've been the customs, or some sectors in the police, or in other sectors of the administration. I have to say that because of the experience of the new system, and because of the manipulations and speculations of the political class, the Albanians, at the beginning of transition, and for some years, they wanted to believe that they could become rich without working. They could become rich by participating in such games like pyramid schemes, and or that the Albanians could be built by the European Union or from United States, etc. So the fight against corruption is connected not only with the will of the government and with the authorities and of the international community, which don't want its money to go waste in Albania, but also it has to do with the strengthening of the institutional framework. It has to do with the political stability. It has to do with the advance of some fundamental reforms, like it is a public administration reform, like it is a decentralization reform. And Also, the corruption can be measured. And I have to say to you that in the last years, in the country, there is a significant progress in changing the situation in the fiscal administration, which has been the most affected in the last year by the corruption, in the taxes administration and in the customs administration. And the revenues have been increased very significantly, and it shows that when there is a will, when there is a reform, when there is a modern legislation, when there is a strict personal policy, also the result could come. I have to say that the Albanian government actually has its new program on anti-corruption, which is done in cooperation with the international community, World Bank, OSCE, and also which is compatible with the anti-corruption initiative in the context of the Stability Pact, and it is combined of some institutional measures and also some practical actions. And also it's very important to see some examples, some people punished because of the corruption, which is not too easy because it needs a very efficient judiciary system which finalizes this fight against the crime and the corruption. But anyway, I think that this is a very difficult challenge, but that we can win it.
How about the second question? Anyone can answer that.
So your questions had to do that we are excluding the Democrats from the administration.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm saying now that you're in power, what are you doing to ease the hostility between the parties, but maybe perform some sort of integration in government positions?
Okay, so I have to say to you that it is very difficult because of the lack of the will of the existing Democratic Party of Mr. Berisha, and I don't want to use this audience to talk about him or about the opposition in Albania, but I have to say that we have been very open. For example, we offered the head of the Supreme Audit Commission to the Democratic Party because we had promised before we came in power that we would offer it to the opposition. And the Democratic Party refused to take it, and it was taken from another right party, which is named in Albanian Bali Komtar. And also we tried to include them in other institutions, and we have not succeeded because of the lack of will of Mr. Berisha. But I have to say to you that one of my economic advisors has been only 3 years ago member of parliament of Democratic Party and minister of Democratic Party, and many others are in our administration, Mr. Belortaja, because we do not intend to build the Albania alone and for ourselves. So we want the broader participation. We want the capable people to join to the administration. And also, we approved in November the law on civil service in order to build a professional civil service in the country, protected from politics, and the people in the administration to be sure that they can make a career despite of the change of the parties. And this is helpful not only to the people in the administration that belong to the Socialist Party or that feel next to the Socialist Party, but to everybody.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions. This gentleman's been waiting for quite some time. Please.
I only have one short question for either of the honorable gentlemen. My name is Kreshnik Beko. I'm a student here in the United States. I've graduated already. My question relates to comments that foreign political analysts make about the political situation in Albania. most of them seem to agree, and I do agree with them. One of them would actually be Janusz Bugajski, that in Albania there is a lack of an alternative to the Democratic and the Socialist Party. Basically, the Socialist Party and the Democratic Party control all of the resources in the country, especially the propaganda resources. Now, I was wondering, is any of you willing to actually give to other parties more space so people can actually have an alternative to you?
I can say that the Socialist Party, despite of it won more than 65% of the seats in parliament, it gave some key positions to some coalition partners in order to share responsibilities with them and in order to give a message of integrating also other parties and that have some capable people in governing the country. So I can't blame the Socialist Party for not having the third alternative.
Well, normally everybody in Albania has the freedom to candidate and to ask for a vote. And we are not going to invent something that is not voted. For sure, we will try to be very tolerant while in government, to not behave in a triumphalistic way with a majority vote, because we need to make clear in public that the majority is not the monopoly of wisdom. That's why we are opening the party to the civil society to enter into partnership context, not to recruit it. But if you and Mr. Bugajski would find some alternative that tomorrow will be voted, we will surrender to the outcome of the vote.
Thank you.
Sir.
My name is Sefi Papa. I have been here for 50 years. You described, this is addressed to the Prime Minister as well as to the head of the Socialist Party, you described the presence of the Greek army in Albania in terms of the international European NATO cooperation, etc. It turns out that there are press reports and internet reports that the Greek army personnel in full regalia, in full military regalia, have carried the epitaph of the Orthodox faithful in Durrës during the ceremony of Easter. How do you explain this mission of the Greek army in Albania? Have they finished all the other military missions that they have to do now, political and social intervention in Albania?
So, I was very much surprised of hearing here some question on the Orthodox Church and on the Greek army in Albania. And I want to invite everybody to understand that the relations between Albania and Greece are a new one and have to be conceived differently in the framework of the future integration of Albania in European Union and in NATO. And we have not to forget that Italy and Greece are the only two countries, neighboring countries, that are part of EU and NATO. And regarding with their presence, I cannot talk for any detail that has happened in Durrës or somewhere else. But I have to say that in Albania there are some different military presence. And no one was asking here that why there is a Turkish military presence in Albania. There is also a Turkish military presence in Albania. And
Prime
also
Minister,
there is an Italian military...
I can give you a copy of the press report.
It depends what kind of press it is, and I am very open to see it and also to verify it. But I have to say that we have to understand that we have not to exaggerate the things. And we have to see friends and not enemies around.
Mr. Nano?
Well, if you allow me, be sure, since there is guaranteed by our government as well freedom of belief and religion in Albania. For 2 consecutive weekends, the Italian military had their Easter, and the other weekend, the Greek military had their Easter. We had ours.
It's not the same thing. You are avoiding the question. The Greek military are participating and carrying the epitaph. In my home...
We don't know something that you read in the press and we don't see with our eyes in Albania. Please, feel confident.
Press report now.
Yes,
and
Okay, we can see it and we can verify it, no problem.
We promise an answer to the questions, but not necessarily an answer that you're happy with. So thank you for bringing the question. And I'd like to thank the Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister for their insightful remarks this evening.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr.